Today we turn to the book of Lamentations, the second book that Jeremiah wrote. The big book, over 50 chapters, we looked at last time. But Lamentations is only 5 chapters, and it's about exactly what it says it is. It's a lamentation. It's a lament. Our key word would have to be lament. He is sorrowful. He's crying out in his sorrow and his broken heart. Why is he so crushed? Well, the people of Israel are now right at the precipice of destruction. Matter of fact, they may have already gone over. But the Babylonians have come. They have destroyed Jerusalem, are in the process of doing so. Everything that Jeremiah has known and loved all of his life is being taken away, is being destroyed. The people of Israel deserve this, and he talks about that in chapters 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. They have rebelled against the Lord. They refused the message that Jeremiah and other prophets had given them, and they had really never turned back to him, even though he called them to return time after time after time. And so they're getting what they deserve. They're getting judgment, but our prophet is crushed. He is sorrowful. He's weeping. And he, as a matter of fact, he personally is at the point of despair. In chapter 3, by the time we get to chapter 3, verses 8 and so forth, the prophet himself is at the end of himself, and he's starting to blame God. You ever do that? You're so far down, you're struggling so deeply that you start to blame God. The prophet did that. Verse 8, even when I cry out and call for help, he shuts out my prayer. He's not listening to me. In verse 12, he bent his bow and he set his target for the arrow. God himself is sending his arrows into me. It is God who's bringing this pain and suffering in my life. Verse 14, I've become a laughingstock to my people. They're mocking Saul all the day. They're making fun of him. Verse 15, he has filled me with bitterness. He has made me drunk with wormwood. God has caused him to become bitter. That's his testimony at this time. And so by verse 17, he says, my soul has been rejected from peace, and I have forgotten happiness. I have no peace, and I have no happiness. Verse 18, so I say, my strength has perished, and so is my hope from the Lord. He is at the bottom of life. He has no hope. Folks, when you run out of hope, you're at the bottom of life. And that's where this prophet is. Remember, this is a man who's faithfully served God for decades. In the midst of all sorts of struggles and failure as a minister, really, he still has remained faithful. But now enough is enough. Everything is imploding on him, and he has no hope. And we're glad we don't stay there, because now he moves into, in this desert of sorrow, he moves into a great oasis of hope. And we have this great section in chapter 3. He says in verse 19, remembering my affliction and my wandering and the wormwood and bitterness, as he meditated on that, he said, surely my soul remembers and is bowed down within me. I'm at this low ebb of life. Then something changes. Here's a great shift in his thinking. Verse 21, this I recall to my mind. Therefore I have hope. What changed? Well, he stopped meditating upon the sorrows around him and began to meditate on his God. He says in verse 22, the Lord's loving kindness indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. He's starting to think about the nature of God, who God is, not the circumstances of the world around him, not his own personal heartaches and sorrows, but on the nature of God. And he recalls the loving kindness of God, this compassionate, faithful, merciful God that he is. And he says, these loving kindnesses never cease. He knows that to be true. And he says his compassions never fail. They go on endlessly. And so he knows that to be true of God. They're new every morning. And then he says, great is your faithfulness. Not only is he a loving and kind God and a gracious God and compassionate God, but he's a faithful God. He is never going to fail us. And as he began to think about that, his thinking shifts, and he goes to verse 24. The Lord is the portion of my soul, therefore I have hope in him. My portion, that which I really need in life, is God. He is the portion of my soul, not these other things that are temporary that I may lose and that may hurt me. The Lord is the portion. Verse 25 said, the Lord is good to those who wait on him, to the person who seeks him. The Lord's nature, once again, is in focus, and he looks at him and he knows that the Lord is good. And now his hope begins to return. He says, perhaps, verse 29, there is hope. Where's his hope from? It's found in the Lord himself. Not in his circumstances. They were hopeless, but the Lord was not hopeless. What is our key verse then? Our key verse has to be one that many of you have memorized and loved for years. Back in chapter 3, verse 22, a little longer than some, but well worth the memorization and the meditation. The Lord's loving kindnesses indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And when you meditate on that, folks, you will have a wonderful day in the Lord.